Hi, I'm Nikki. I want to inspire you to live authentically. My aim is to raise consciousness through interviewing people that are living truly to their nature and purpose. A big welcome to David Kahn, who in part 2 of his interview today talks about the 8 psychic senses and what to do if you are an empath. He also chats to me about moving from rock music to the 5 frequencies for spiritual growth.
It can be a bit overwhelming sometimes because it really depends on how much prior knowledge people have had with this stuff, right?
Yeah.
People are just opening up to the idea that, there's energy out there. This stuff is probably going to be like, whoa, what the heck's this guy talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, what I'm interested in will attract a certain audience.
Yeah.
And there'll always be people that listen to something and go, that's a load of crap. But there will be people that are interested in wanting to learn about this stuff, and I think that it's very important to help people along with their journeys to learn about these new things or get a deeper understanding of it. So you were telling me that there were 8 different ways of interpreting symbology or understanding.
I'd say you can break it down to 8, but it's symbolized by the Star of David, the upward facing triangle meeting the lower facing triangle, which is the symbolism of the masculine meeting the feminine and being in complete unity. And that's really that equilibrium. When there's scientifically, it's hemispheric balance in the brain. And so we work a lot with that when I do the brainwave entrainment stuff. But that symbolism allows us to lock in, and there's actually 6 different abilities, but you can break it down into another 2, and when you hear them, you'll understand why. Because there's 3 different types of feeling, is what it is.
Right.
And so that's why sometimes you'll hear 8 and sometimes you'll hear 6. But these abilities are essentially how we can perceive unseen data. And one of the most interesting things, and it's absolutely essential for people to do that now, because we are subjected to a level of misinformation, blatant lies about reality that is harming the human species. And people that have these abilities developed are able to navigate because they have a good navigation system in place. And so these 6 abilities, one way that people develop them all the time is if they grow up in difficult circumstances. Let's say they're a kid on the streets or something. They have to read people's energy because they don't know who's sincere or not. Everybody's trying to make a buck off of them, so they have to be able to read. Or somebody who grows up as a kid in an abusive household, they have to read their energy. Is that alcoholic father? How close is he to just start throwing punches right now? That type of thing. I have to be able to read his energy. I have to see if I have to withdraw. So a lot of people who had their psychic abilities awaken, it came from some sort of trauma. And that doesn't have to be the case. That's just a way to kind of thrust it out there. A lot of people I meet too, they just have a disinterest in, life through the 5 senses. And so they're looking for something more, and they start to gradually expand, and they expand their awareness. And like, oh wow, as I'm learning more about spirituality, I'm learning more about, people who are channels and mystics and psychics and all that. What's that all about? And then they're like, oh, actually, some people are born with that, some people develop it in childhood, but you can develop it even as an adult.
So what am I looking to develop? These 6 abilities?
Good, we'll get to what those are. So I think that they tend to reflect what a person's characteristics are in life, because 5 of them are energetic forms of the 5 senses, and then the other 3 are a little bit different. But they're clairaudience, which I talked about. It's one of the more common ones that people hear message. They get a resounding yes inside their body, their knowing, their intuition, the voice of intuition, they could say, voice of reason. Clairvoyance, and that's the word that people are most familiar with, and that's being able to see. And that could be externally seeing energy, seeing auras, or it can also be seeing in the mind's eye, seeing visions, seeing patterns, seeing movies unfold or imagery. Then there's clairsalience, which is actually being able to smell. And it's very handy, believe it or not. If you've ever had the experience of you walk into somewhere and there's people there and you smell something, and it's like either can smell really good, and it's like you step into a kitchen when their food's being cooked with love and you're like, oh, it just does it for me. And everyone else is like, oh, yeah, I guess I kind of smell that, but not really. Or sometimes you can walk into an area and something smells off. It's just like, woof, it doesn't smell good in here, but everybody else doesn't seem to notice. And that is sort of a psychic indication, especially if it's trying to get your attention fast. People that have clairsalience almost have like animal-like instincts. So it's a very fast way to get a hold of somebody's attention. Clairgustance is taste. And it's literally, sometimes it's like people will be in, you know, a deep trance state, let's say, and they can literally taste metal or they can taste something. I don't work too much with clairgustance, but I assume if you're a, you know, cosmic chef or something like that, you know, you'd want to be able to taste the thing before you actually made the pairing happen. So I could see how a very talented chef would want to have that ability established. Then there's claircognizance, clair-knowing. And that's one that came online for me first. That clairvoyance and clairaudience, for me personally, are the things that came on first that I dealt with. But claircognizance is you just know the answer. You tend to interrupt people. It's very annoying because all of a sudden it pops in your mind and you just say it. And people are like, why'd you interrupt me? And I was like, sorry, it just popped up. I just knew the answer. I knew what you were going to say. I finished your sentence, whatever it was. That's clear knowing, claircognizance. And then there's 3 ones based on touch. And so you could incorporate them into 1, and then you have 6, and then you have sort of the 6-pointed star. And the reason why that is because in the progression of perfecting one's ability, you want to have all of those areas developed. You want to have sort of the 6 abilities developed, but you can break that touch ability into 3 because there's clairtangents, which would be sort of if I were to, let's say, I know people who are involved in kinetic therapies, people who are involved with, you know, body work, that type of thing. They can basically do a hand scan over somebody and be like, oh, this area of your body, I can feel that. And then they know how to direct their hands and their energy. That's an externalized version. Another one is that's called clairtangents. Then there's clairsentience, which is basically you feel it in your body. You feel something strongly. And then you tend to know from there. So the other thing is claircognizance is kind of tapped into all of these because it's sort of the interpretation of them. It's sort of you're getting higher information that comes in, but you have to know what to do with it. So claircognizance is sort of attached to all of these. And then finally there's clairempathy. And that's one, I think when people get more sensitive, they tend to develop that. You know, somebody steps into your presence and all of a sudden your feeling changes based on their energy. And that's another very, very common one.
Yeah. I think a lot of people feel that if someone walks into a room that they're in that's either has a really great up energy, then you're like, ooh, wow, you're drawn to that, or if someone is very depressed, suddenly you can feel that.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too, is with empathy, you know, you're looking at body language cues a lot of the time, or what somebody's saying. You know, to empathize with somebody is like, hey, I wanted to talk to you about this. And it's like, okay, I'm going to switch into empathy. But with clairempathy, it's like literally somebody could walk into the room and they might be having a poker face on their face, but you're like, oh, I can feel into them. I can feel what's really going on. And I think that's the more developed clairempathy.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that they're empathic. And so how do you turn that off? How do you work with that so that you're not hooked into other people's stuff all the time?
The first and most basic thing that you do as an empath is you're very, very discerning about where you place your energy. You obviously, the one thing empaths end up doing, and it's to their own self-sabotage and detriment, is they go out and they try to martyr themselves to fix the world. So they go and they throw themselves into very dark areas that need healing, and they end up flattened. So the first thing is that they have to realize they have to sit in their own energy first, and then from that place begin to figure out the things that they can actually work with and help and actually cause a better change. So it's usually coming back in, and you know, I think empaths, I've known many empaths, and they tend to do very well when they're on their own. in their own space. And if their space is set up nicely, and they're very discerning about who they put their energy in touch with, because there's a pattern with a lot of empaths that they end up with sort of a broken narcissistic type person. So they like to give energy. The narcissistic person likes to take energy. The narcissistic person, they can see this wounded gem in there, and they keep trying to help, and it's like helping a black hole. It's a sinkhole. And then they're like, oh, that person was a narcissist and they're terrible. It's like, no, it's just an energy dynamic where one is a taker and one is a giver. And then they find another similar relationship and they have another similar horrible relationship, and then just string after string after string of partners. And it's like, wow, you seem to date the worst of the bunch out there.
So what you do could actually help that person.
Well, what I do is I wouldn't go in there and I wouldn't generally be like, well, I'm going to go to the Akashic Records and I'm going to bring, no, I'd be like, look, stop doing that. See the pattern for what it is. I would, however, go into the Akashic Records, because what happens, especially with lovers, this is an interesting thing I see a lot. When people say I love you, and they really mean it, like they're not themselves. They have that hit of endorphins running, and they fall in love, and they basically form a very strong connection, energetic, chemical, biological connection with somebody. And it's good, and they're both high. They start to form energetic tethers. And then what ends up happening is that as the relationship goes on, and if it tends to dwindle, those tethers are still there, so they're energetically connected to the other person, but they're not getting that energy through a loving connection anymore. They're getting it through, picking each other apart.
Right.
And the term emotional bank account has come up, where, it's like, you have to invest in the relationship. You have to invest in that. And if that stays healthy, then you maintain a healthy connection with the person. But if it gets unhealthy, you still have that connection going on, but it's now in a very negative, unhealthy way. So even if you break up with the person, you're still energetically tied. A lot of people have, thoughts about their ex, and then they're calling and they're talking, and it's disastrous communication. It never works out. And then they'll come to me, and I'll sit down and I'll be like, well, there's tethers. Are you ready to let them go? And usually I make people work for it, because I don't want to just be somebody who says, okay, well, it's done, I've healed you, go off, and I'll see you in a week. when you go and do that. I try to make them aware, why are you doing that? What's causing that? Because I actually want to see some growth of awareness in them. And so I can make the energetic shift, but they have to have the impetus to want to actually change it. Because it's of no real benefit, in my opinion, to always make the correction and then have the person repeat the same mistakes.
Right. Yeah.
And so a lot of the time with people that are empathic, it's really a lot about boundaries, and it's a lot about teaching them too energetically. You don't lean outward when you're in public and that type of thing. It's sort of, you keep that energy a little bit closer. You realize that. You have to assess a person before you really start to give them your trust.
Yeah. So it's about breaking those energetic patterns as well as the actual initial healing of the wound.
Yeah. A lot of the time with empaths, especially the empaths that are just naturally these bright, sparkly people, is that they're going to have an effect on people. And so people are going to get a hit out of them. So people that are maybe more miserable, most of the time they meet this person, they get a hit out of them. And then they're all of a sudden lit up, and they're seeing the best in that person initially. So they're like, oh, I can trust this person. And then they're around them for a little while, and then of course the shadow side comes out. And so the thing is that empaths need to learn to be discerning. Empathy is a very feminine trait. It's a very receptive trait. The masculine is more compartmentalized and discerning. So for somebody to balance both forces in themselves, balance that within themselves, again, going back to the six-pointed star, is that equilibrium of, okay, well, I'm going to be empathic and receptive and really feel into things, but I'm going to be discerning where my energy goes. And it's learning that skill, because it's too easy for people who are more receptive to just, put themselves out there, have no boundaries, and kind of get flattened by the world. And then they sort of end up growing resentful over time. Likewise, the opposite end of the spectrum is to see the world too compartmentalized, too logical, too linear, and never allowing any magic to happen, being far too calculated with every move.
How would you work with someone like that?
Non-linearly. Meaning it's harder, because they have to want to believe. They have to see the pain in their ways. And the ways that I tend to see that are people that have, a lot of resource issues, money, that type of thing. They'll be like, yeah, I'm just slaving away for money. And men generally fall into that category, that overly logical category. It's a harder one to work with because even if they see something magical, they're going to be skeptical of it. That left brain really shuts it down quickly. The logical
but then
mind.
I guess when they do have a shift, it's that much more powerful.
Yeah. The problem that you run into is when they have a shift and they get a hit of that, they tend to build a story around it fairly quickly. Because again, the logical mind snaps back into being control. So then, a very crude example would be, let's say they went to a particular yoga class, and then they had an experience at that yoga class. And let's just say it was, vinyasa flow or something. And then all of a sudden they proclaim, well, vinyasa flow is the only way, to enlightenment, because I had this experience and nothing else did it, nothing else will do it, so this is the way to go. And then they get very rigid in that. Or, they can get hyper-focused on that one thing and not see, again, from a broader perspective. And this probably would be a very good segue into a lot of the brainwave entrainment stuff.
You do, what's it, isochronic frequency, right?
That...
Or is it not really sound frequency more?
Put it this way, everything I work with is frequency.
Okay.
A lot of the psychic stuff is the frequencies we cannot see. Sound and light are going to be the frequencies that work best for people that are insensitive, because they can't feel the other energies that exist in the other parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. So the electromagnetic spectrum is, huge, and it goes from 0 to all the way to the end. And scientists, cosmic rays are the fastest frequency out there, and the slowest, of course, are some of the natural rhythms, earthquakes, that type of thing. But anyway, sound is, a very minute portion of that down here. Light is a very minute portion here. And that's all we can perceive. So very small slivers of the realm of frequency. And so a lot of the Akashic work, tarot, astrology works within these other facets, these other things we can't see nor hear. But the work that I'm doing now, and it's not just sound, by the way, I'm actually studying a lot of animation. I'm studying a lot of the corresponding color frequencies for sound. So there's something called cymatics, where you're actually able to make a visual representation of the sound frequencies. And the reason for that is because transformation can also take place through the five senses, through seeing and hearing. And a lot of cultures around the world use symbolism. They make people study symbolism because that's one way that's in front of them. It's in this physical reality. And so they can begin to tune into that through the physical, through the tangible, or through the audible. And so working with sound and light is very important, because that way, that part of the brain can then be wired, and then it can eventually be brought into hemispheric balance with the right side of the brain and increase sensitivity to some of those energies that are a little bit more hard to perceive. So the work I did with sound, actually, I've always been interested in sound. I was an international touring rock musician, and I used to tell myths through very kind of lively symphonic rock music. I used to tell the hero's journey, essentially, in many different ways. But it was difficult because I wanted to do it more consciously, and the sphere of working in that genre of music isn't suited for consciousness. It's suited for loud music and partying, bar gigs, that type of thing. So I eventually said, I've had enough of this, but I want to dive deeper into the sound and really understand it. I've always had a side that could do acoustic music, and I used to just play acoustic music and really get in the zone with it, and it would have an effect on people. It was sort of like any performer who really is in the zone. They're able to take the space that they're in and communicate that through the medium of the instrument. So the actual music's important. But when I begin to look at that more closely, I can see that the actual tuning of the music is even more important. So the actual frequencies of the music. And so I began to play with the tuning. And I've actually developed a lot of formulas to kind of help me tune instruments differently very quickly, like on the fly. And so a lot of the instruments I use are synthesizers or pads that you can tune very easily. And then some of the stuff I use is stringed instruments, which you can also tune, and the voice, which is tunable just by how we alternate sort of, our larynx and, our chest voice and the amount of air we're using and that type of thing. So, that is very easy to tune. A flute, not so much, or something that is fixed. It's a little bit more challenging. So I have to pick my instruments. But the things I can tune them to, I actually use astrology quite a bit. So I look at the orbits of various planets, and then I take those orbits and I multiply them. So I figure out, okay, if I multiply this, by a power of 2 to 40 degrees, meaning that, 40 octaves higher of Neptune's orbit is audible, let's say. So you can hear that as a frequency. So it's the Neptune frequency. And then I can tune a whole song to that, and I know the energetic properties of Neptune, so I know what I'm actually imbuing. So there's the actual tuning of the thing, and then there's the conscious imbuement through the performance. So that's the music. The other component is what you termed isochronic. Isochronic is a type of brainwave entrainment method, and there's several. There's binaural beats, there's monaural beats, there's isochronic. And the way that this works is it creates a signal that the brain picks up on, and it takes the brain and guides it to particular frequency ranges on a schedule. And so what I do is I map these in advance based on the effect I'm trying to achieve, and then test them to see, does it actually create the states that it is. What they found is that there's basically the brain is like a vault of different states of perception. So, there's frequencies for past life regression. There's frequencies for the release of human growth hormone. There's frequencies for astral travel. There's frequencies for relaxation. There are frequencies for creativity, frequencies for bone regeneration. The list goes on with this. Obviously, it's not like you listen to one and all of a sudden your bones regenerate if you have a broken arm or something. It's just a frequency that's going to facilitate more of that. And I got very interested when I tried one of these sessions that somebody had mapped Zen Buddhist monks 5 months in retreat in meditation. And so they had taken their brainwaves, reversed engineered a frequency schedule for that, and then I tried it as a music session. And I had a complete experience of non-duality in 40 minutes.
Wow.
I didn't know where my body ended and where the room began, essentially. And so it's like, wow, it's like Neo in the Matrix. I just downloaded the experience of these Zen monks in meditation. Now there's great power with that and great danger. If you gave that to somebody who's never done anything before, you could take them into a state that's very deep. And one thing I do see with people sometimes, when I give them some of the little bit more deep ones, often they penetrate a layer where there's a lot of irritation, chronic thinking, trauma, that type of thing stored. So you have to go slowly. Because the people that are, I'm tying this back in with the logical thing. So the brainwave schedule is a very powerful way, and using one of these different methods, binaural beats, what it does is it sends a different signal to the right ear and left ear, and they're offset by a number of hertz. And so the brain recalculates the difference of the two. So if you have 204 and 200 hertz, you take 204 minus 200 and you get 4 hertz. And so you just play with the differences of those two waveforms to create a schedule. It's a bit techy, but what you do is you basically create something that sounds like a wobble, and it entrains the brain.
Sounds like a slow wave form to me.
That's how you'd hear it.
Right.
You'd hear whoa, 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 whoa. It would slow down and it'd speed up. Isochronic, and the thing about binaural is sometimes they work for certain frequencies, sometimes they don't. The other thing about them is you need headphones. You have to use headphones with them.
Because it's by too.
Yeah, it's by, exactly. And so if you just have it playing over a speaker, you won't actually hear it. Now the way to get around that is called monaural, and monaural is where the two frequencies are collapsed. So you hear like a whoa, 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 whoa. So it's already done for you before it comes out of the speaker. And the third type is isochronic. And isochronic is very powerful. It mimics what the shaman's drums do. like dun 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 dun, because it's a pulse. It's an on-off pulse. It's like it sounds like a Kalashnikov almost, or something, at a high frequency, and a low frequency is like a. But what it does is that on-off, it basically takes the brain, entrains it into whatever frequencies you want it to go. So those are the way that works, and I try to create a schedule that matches the music, and then we usually put guidance over top too. So my voice or Vanessa's voice or whoever's voice. I work with hypnotherapists sometimes, so I design them for their hypnotherapy sessions, and then they speak over top. And basically that's, it's sort of like, you're creating one experience, and you can do that with certain music frequencies, and you can do that with certain brainwave entrainment frequencies to match what the actual guidance is. So it's like 3 different layers or levels that work together to create a very powerful effect for people. And really, the way that I see it is that the brainwave entrainment, it's the brain, but it actually has a somatic experience in the body. It's very tangible. So it's actually working on the body level. It actually sends the messages through the neuropeptides in the body, through the whole nervous system, to relax or to speed up or to do whatever you're trying to do. The music is an emotional experience, so it works on the emotions. The guidance is the mind. If you think about it, a creative visualization, your mind is working hard. So it actually incorporates all 3 layers of those lower densities, I'd say. The things that people can basically say, yeah, like anybody can go in and say, yeah, I heard this creative guidance, I experienced something listening to the music, and there was a different sensation in my body. And so it can work well with people who are stuck in the left hemisphere of the brain. Now, I'm going to get to what challenges we encounter with this. There's 5 main brainwave frequencies. And these 5 brainwave frequencies are the dominant frequency at which the brain operates. So there's what's known as gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. And these are well researched. Like, this is very well researched. It's a part of neuroscientific literature. Of course, a lot of neuroscientists are skeptical about this stuff working. They're like, well, there's not enough conclusive studies and all this. But when you start to experience this and you start to look at some of the more alternative scientists who have done this, you see very clearly that you take that body of information and it really does work well. And you know what? Like, there's a lot of people that are using this in sports medicine, in all sorts of high-level therapies out there. So it's becoming more and more of a phenomenon. Now, what I'm interested in using this for is to help people spiritually develop. And the left portion of the brain, like I said, there's 5 frequencies, tends to be stuck in one frequency. And it's the dominant frequency that our culture as a whole gets stuck in. We get stuck in do, go, do. I am a separate person, driving a separate vehicle, having a separate existence, and it's about me and my life and my family and my achievements. And that, they don't see the interconnectedness of things. The left brain, it's a concentrated, focused, stressed out frequency. It's called beta. It's very, very good for doing certain things. It has a frequency range of 14 to 27 hertz. So per second, the brain is emitting a signal that oscillates between 14 and 27 hertz, somewhere in that range, depending on how fired up they are or how relaxed they are. But it's not a very relaxed state.
I guess there's quite a lot of adrenaline going through that body if you're in that waveform all the time.
Well, the other thing too is that people say they're going to watch Netflix and relax, but their brain could still be hardwired into that frequency range. So they're just sitting there tense, not doing much.
Right.
But they're concentrating on the movie or what it's playing. So they're distracted from the other issues in their life. So they say it's relaxation. I would say what people call relaxation and what relaxation actually is are 2 very different things. Because for me, relaxation is actually a brainwave state that a lot of a different quality of thing happens. And that brainwave state is between 8 and 14 hertz. It's called alpha. It's flow state. It's like when the interview gets going and it's good and you feel a real reciprocity with the person, you feel a real reciprocity with the environment. And then you go and you take a nice walk on the beach and you see the sun, and all of a sudden you get great ideas and insights about life. There's dogs running around and they're running up and playing with you, and You're just part of the whole scene. You're part of that flow. High performance athletes, when they're doing their thing, and they runners look like gazelles, just gliding, or figure skaters are just twirling off the ice, and they're just moving in the most beautiful way. That's alpha. It's a very, very euphoric, relaxed state to be in.
I would maybe call it being in your genius.
Yeah, exactly. Flow state is what they scientifically term it. And we can achieve it when we're doing something that requires a sufficient level of skill. So we have to have a certain level of skill, and then there's a certain level of relaxation about it. So again, it's a balance of the masculine and the feminine. I go back to this a lot because the masculine is the actual technique, and the feminine is the release of the surrender. So the masculine is I've studied this thing, this discipline, and the feminine is, I'm going to break the rules and just forget it, just do the thing. Like when I play music, I'm not thinking about the piece. If I am, I'm not in flow. When I'm learning a piece, I'm not really in flow with it. It's when I've got the muscle memory established and that's out of the way, and then I'm playing piano or I'm playing guitar and I'm just in my element with it. That's flow. Psychic skills happen in the next layer down.
You can find out more on David Kahn at thebladeandchalice.com and The Blade and Chalice on Instagram. I hope you enjoyed the NixyPod podcast. Please do subscribe.